You're looking at a mini computer. I mean, this is a full-on computer. This board, it doesn't have a monitor, keyboard, or mouse hooked up to it right now, but it could. Doesn't mean it's not working right now. It is working right now. This is called an Arduino Mega 2560. Arduino makes 6 or 7 different boards or microcomputers. So how can you say this is a computer? Well, that square component in the middle is a processor. I believe it's a 4-core, quad-core, in other words, processor. It's running at about 800 megahertz, I believe, which is not as fast as modern processors in your laptops or your desktops. Now, I have this board on top of a 10-year-old desktop. It's an old Mac Pro tower, and it's a 8-core technology, Intel processors, running at 2.26 gigahertz. So, it's like almost 3 times the speed, clock speed, but with the multiple cores. So you're talking, the desktop here is probably 4 or 5 times the computer as far as processing power goes as this one. However, this desktop cost $3,000 when it was new, or more. Yeah, this was an 8-core, so this was like with everything, depending on how much RAM you got, this could be like, it was like a $4,000 computer 10 years ago. The Mac Pro Tower, that is. This Arduino Mega 2560 microcomputer with RAM and processor built in is less than $10. It's $9.60 including shipping on eBay from China if you wait. They make smaller versions of this card that don't have as many pin hookups for wires, so they're not as capable. They don't do as much, but they're less money. You can get those for under $5, the smaller ones. They're computers. So it's a system. Arduino is a system. It's not an operating system per se, but it is a system of components and then software and programming languages that are compatible. So I purchased a starter kit. I want to learn about Arduino technology. I want to learn about these boards, what you can do with them, what you can't do with them. It's my understanding you can control everything in your house with one or more of these things. I mean, it's a computer, so what I want to do basically is I want to control a bunch of motors and lights. I'm going to pretty much be restricted to just controlling lights, turning lights on and off of all kinds all over the place, and then I want motors of different kinds to do different things. That's where the tricky part's going to come in, because I want blinds to be opening and closing, I want lazy Susans to spin, I want levers to pull and push. I want to control a bunch of different things via smartphone. And so the smartphone's going to have to communicate with this Arduino board as well. So that's going to involve more wiring and modules. But it's very doable. Normally you'd use like a radio controlled or an infrared remote for these Arduinos. Those are the modules that are cheaper and more popular. but they're more restrictive. So far I've bought this $35 starter kit on eBay that comes with like 50 different components. If you include the wires and the resistors that come with it, got close to 200 parts for $35. You can't beat that. So it does come with a keyboard, a little flat keyboard that can be wired to this Arduino board. Let's see, it's a 8-pin, 8 holes there. So you would hook it up to 8 different holes on the board, and then that would be connected via these wires, right? And you got something like a mouse. You got this joystick, and it's a push button joystick, so you can do some clicking as well as the joystick. It's got 5 pins that would be wired to the board. All kinds of components come with this kit. I gotta tell you, I'm not going to go into the detail of everything right now, but the basics of it is, comes with these breadboards, a little one and a big one. Here's the little one, and they hook up to the Arduino computer, mini computers, via wires that plug into these black terminals on the sides of the card. And so the first project they get you is to make some electricity go through this resistor and then this diode so that the light turns on. Well, that's easy enough to do, right? All you have to do is hook up the red wire to the positive, the black wire to the ground. Excuse me a second. I'm going to find you the ground pin on this thing. There it is. Second one. And by hooking it up, so now I've hooked up so that this first project is now working. I've got the positive from the board and the negative from the board hooked up in sequence so that the juice or the current flows from the positive through the red wire into the resistor, through the resistor where the current is restricted down by this 220 ohm resistor, so that we don't burn up this LED, and we do give it enough current to light up the LED, however, and then we ground out the LED back to the ground on the board. And that's the simplest of projects, right? So I'm going to disconnect the ground, and I'm going to disconnect the positive from this board that's already hooked up for a more complicated project. So right now I've got this Arduino hooked up to the battery and wired to this breadboard, it's called. And that's where I have a prototype of a device that you could make permanent later. But with these breadboards, you can put everything together and make it work without soldering everything together. With these breadboards, it's all plug and play. And that's real good for prototypes, when you're making things and you're testing things. Now, if I wanted to put this together and make something permanent, I could eliminate the breadboard and just solder everything together. But this more complicated project is just a project to control a motor. So let me move something here. Move the kit and move something here in front of the motor. So here's a motor, and it will spin. All the motor does is spin. It's an electric motor. Has a positive and negative terminal, and those two terminals are wired into the breadboard at some point, which are then is wired into the Arduino board, which is then in turn wired to the battery. And in theory, we should be able to get some electricity, some current, to flow from the battery to the motor in a controlled manner of our choosing. Now, in order to accomplish this, in order to facilitate this, this project includes 4 buttons, 4 lights, and then 4 corresponding resistors. Looks like one of these resistors is off. Let me adjust that. There we go. Okay. So this project is pretty simple still. Even though it looks like a bunch of spaghetti, is the way I would call it. Back when I was a kid, we would call this just spaghetti. It's very confusing. It's a bunch of wires. You'd have to be a genius like Einstein to understand what all of this does. I don't know how people design circuits. This is supposed to be a simple one? You gotta be kidding me. So anyway, that's how I used to think. So eventually we'll get to radio controlled and infrared controlling everything, and hopefully control things via smartphone, via Wi-Fi or 4G, whatever. But I'm not there yet. Right now, you got to interface with the Arduino by pushing buttons. But once I get down how to do everything by pushing buttons, I'll be able to add the wireless interface, and I'll be able to control the same things wirelessly. So to start off with, again, we're trying to control just this one motor for now. The first button is to turn the motor on and off. That's it. It's a switch button. What is that called? The passive switch? Push it, and it'll stay in that state. You push it again, and it changes state and will stay there. So on, off. That's the state. Same thing with the second button. That's going to change the direction from clockwise to counterclockwise, or vice versa. Whichever way it's spinning now, it's going to spin the other way. The other 2 buttons real quickly. The third button is to make the motor spin faster, or acceleration. Excuse me. The fourth and final button is deceleration. Excuse my finger now. My goodness. Needed a drink. The fourth button is deceleration, to slow the motor. Let's give a demonstration. I happen to have hooked this up, and I got it to work the first time. I'm hooking all this up, and I didn't make any mistakes. But when I bought this kit, it comes with links to a website. The Adept website has a number of lessons online, and they give you the software programming to download. And this particular project has like 4 pages of code here. Here's one page, the first page. And what you do is you hook up this board to the computer that you're working on via this blue cable, and then you upload this code to the chip on the board, so that this board here is now running this program that you've downloaded from the internet, from the website that's giving you the instruction. And the website, all this came with the kit. Okay, the Adept Arduino starter kit. So we went over the lesson 1, the blinking LED, or no, we didn't. but we did make one LED work. So now I'm on lesson 22. I skipped lessons 2 through 21. Wanted to get right to how to control a DC motor. So it gives you the components necessary for the project. Then it gives you the electronic theory. It shows you some diagrams. It's got links to other diagrams. Then here's a printout of all the code that you need to upload to your board to make this work. Here's a photograph of the finished project using a smaller breadboard than the instructions use, and a different battery and a different configuration altogether than the instructions I followed, but still it's the same circuit. And then that's the end of the lesson, so you could go back or forwards to different lessons using different components. So I did indeed follow this lesson, and I uploaded the software to the board, and I wired everything according to the diagram on the website, and I hooked up the battery, and yeah, it worked. It'll still probably work. I don't change anything. So hit the first button, and sure enough, the light illuminates, showing that the power is on for the motor, and the motor is spinning. Now if I hit the second button, that should make it spin in the other direction. It'll jump. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, see it jump? Let me pull back, make it go in the opposite direction, back to the original direction. And the light blinks to show you that it's doing it, and then it makes it go in the other direction. So that's working. Now the third button is to make it go faster. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. And faster, 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 faster again. It's really going now. Alright. I'm going to run down my battery if I keep that up. So let's make it decelerate by hitting the fourth button. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Total of 5 times we hit the decelerate button. Now the motor is spinning slowly again. And so this project, all 4 buttons are doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm able, via a $10 microcomputer and some downloaded code, I'm able to control this motor no problem. And this is just a lesson to learn how to use the technology. You know, I'm not going to actually be using these buttons to control this motor, but I'll have a bunch of motors hooked up, and I'll be using my smartphone to control those motors. And Arduino products, Arduino boards and components. So now we can turn off the device by hitting the first button again. And that's it. That is an introduction to the Arduino technology in a 20-minute nutshell. Now, if you like this technology, if you like this video, click subscribe.